remembering and celebrating the voice of the Phoenix Suns with Dave Burns and Vince Marotta on Arizona Sports 98.7 and the Arizona Sports app.
It is our distinct pleasure to be able to team up, Vince Marotta, myself, morning and afternoon shows, to get together to talk about, on this, the eve of the Suns season starting, the legendary Hall of Fame voice of the Phoenix Suns who passed away just a couple of months ago. And to honor him and to talk about Al McCoy, and that's what we're here to do for the next hour with a whole bunch of guests, including Jerry Colangelo, who's going to join us here in a few minutes. And Vinny, I can't think of anybody else that I'd rather do this with, anybody else I'd rather be around
right back at you
for the next hour, because you moved here, what, mid-70s?
1979.
1979.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were here for almost all of it. I was here for almost all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have unique perspective as people who were able to enjoy it from almost the start.
Yeah, from my earliest memories of being a Suns fan, which happened even before my family moved. We knew we were moving to Arizona, so as a young kid, I was like, "Ooh, what are my sports teams going to be? They've only got one? Okay, I'm a Suns fan." And then you arrive in Phoenix, and in 1979, Al was only in his 7th or 8th year of doing play-by-play for the Suns, but he was already so entrenched as a major figure, not just with the sports franchise, but with the whole community, which was much smaller back then, as you remember. So, I mean, Al McCoy, in a lot of ways, and I know I speak for a lot of people and similar experiences to a lot of other people, he's kind of been the soundtrack in a certain way of my whole life.
No doubt. I mean, there was a gateway, and the only way in, back then was through Al, and whether it was on the radio or on the TV, and I can still, like in my mind's eye right now, I'm actually seeing it. My mom's old apartment and the TV set and tuning it to channel 45 on the ultra high frequency channel with the rabbit ears and leaning them up against the wall to get the signal. And I can picture, I don't even know how many Saturday nights where it was just get the signal just right so you can watch Al and the Call and the Phoenix Suns. And that was a wash, rinse, repeat moment for almost my entire childhood to be able to experience.
I remember
that.
Further back before the Channel 45 days, they were on Channel 12.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And simulcast. For 31 years, when Al became the play-by-play voice of the Suns, he was the voice of television and radio. So you got him either way you wanted to consume the Suns. And that continued until the early 2000s. And then we got Al solely on radio. And it just, it's been almost a month since he's been gone, and still sad about it, but still thankful for everything that he gave this fan base. And I love that clip that was in the open that Mitch played when Al's doing his final sign-off for his final game, and he says, "So long for now," and you hear just one fan just yell, "We love you, Al." But how many fans feel that way still?
This is what the whole send-off sounded like.
I just want to say a couple of things. Of course, turning to my right, John Bloom, I certainly thank him for all of his work and help these last few years and wish him only more in his professional career as it moves on. And Tim, I said it a moment ago, big guy, what I think of you, you're absolutely the best. And to be with you for 21 years alongside has certainly been a high point, something I will never forget and always remember. I want to say also to Walt Ellis. Walt, you've been with me for so many years as the technical director. We've worked on so many projects. I want to thank you for all of the things that you have been able to be responsible for that have made it easier for me to work.
Thank you, Al. It's been 17 great years.
Yes, it has been. And I want to say something special to a special group of people. Through the years, I've become friends with so many sightless people. And you can't understand what radio and sports radio broadcasting means to these folks. And I've gotten to know so many sightless people that depend on our radio broadcasts. And I've known people that are in hospitals and in veterans hospitals and shut-ins. And I just want to thank all of those folks that depend on radio for letting me be a part of their lives. And to all the rest of you, before we get in, and we're going to wrap this up on our post-game show, I just want to say thank you for 51 wonderful years and allowing me to bring the story of the Suns in the NBA to you. It's been a great ride.
And as you mentioned,
as far as that pretty much wraps things up here. And for one last time, this is Al McCoy saying thanks for being there. Thanks for being with us tonight. And from the Footprint Center here in downtown Phoenix, we'll just say so long for now.
We love you, Al. Joining us right now on this tribute to Al McCoy, of course, this show would be incomplete without the next voice that you're about to hear. Joining us here on Arizona Sports, the local sports leader. Of course, the everything to the Phoenix Suns, Jerry Colangelo, who joins us here on Arizona Sports with Vince Marotta and me, Dave Burns. Jerry, we appreciate you joining us on this this special moment for us to be able to pay tribute to Al McCoy on this, the eve of the NBA season starting. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm fine, and it's nice to be with both of you. It's been a Al McCoy weekend, so to speak, in the sense that we had a church service yesterday at the church that he attended while he was here, Unity Church up in North Phoenix, and then a reception down at the arena later in the day. So also a luncheon today. With a bunch of really good friends of his called the Uglies, believe it or not. Local business guys who are elderly, and they just hang out once a month to tell stories. And I had them over at the Arizona Biltmore, the new clubhouse that we built, and there were some wonderful stories, a lot of laughs, and yeah, it's been a Al McCoy weekend for sure.
That's great. And Jerry, I'd like to go back to the beginning with you, tasked as a young man to really start an NBA franchise from the beginning, and you got the Suns up and running. And then in 1972, Al McCoy becomes the play-by-play radio broadcaster and television broadcaster in the simulcast days. But I know over the years, you really credited Al and what he was able to do in helping sell the NBA to Phoenix, which was a brand new professional sports market. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts and memories on the origins of Al's role doing that.
Absolutely. It took a few years to get him. We were committed in year one by someone who was going to be one of the partners in the Suns, but did not. Carl Eller, he owned KTAR radio and TV at the time. And with the other partners who went forward, he had, he did a deal with them for the rights. So I had to wait. Bob Vacher, who was the sports voice on KTAR, radio and TV, I believe, was named the play-by-play guy. And he was killed, unfortunately, in an automobile accident. So he didn't last very long. I moved Rod Hundley into the play-by-play role because he was doing color. And then Johnny Kerr, who was my dear friend and the first coach, I replaced him with myself on the bench, and Johnny went on to do color commentary. Mm-hmm. But when Al was available, it was his job, and he did a fabulous job. I really put him in the class of Chick Hearn, who sold the Lakers when they moved from Minneapolis to Los Angeles. L.A. was a barren NBA market. They didn't identify with the NBA. It was Chick who sold the game and sold the sport. A fabulous guy, and he and Al became very good friends. And Chick Hearn once told me he thought Al was the best play-by-play guy in the NBA.
Wow. What, from your perspective, and Vince and I obviously come at this from, kids who grew up here in the 70s as we both were, but from your perspective, what was the magic that made Al such a gateway to the Phoenix Suns for kids like me and Vince and fans back then of the Phoenix Suns? What was it about his style that made him so accessible to fans of the Suns?
Well, that's a good question. And basically, I would say to you, he made you didn't have to be there to know what was going on in the game. you almost felt that you were getting not only a play-by-play, but you could picture what was happening on the court. He was that descriptive. He was that good. And, he had a big following of people who were incapacitated and couldn't get to a game. And he wanted to make sure they had a feel and understanding of the game, and he called it accordingly.
Jerry Colangelo, our guest on our tribute to Al McCoy here on Arizona Sports, the local sports leader. I mean, there's been so much talked about, and Al went into the Ring of Honor back in 2017, got the Hall of Fame call with the Kurt Gowdy Award even before that. But, as you look back, and your fingerprints are all over this franchise, as we all know, but can you put, any number or value of what Al McCoy truly meant to the Phoenix Suns? It seems immeasurable to me, Jerry.
Well, let's put it this way. We've had a lot of really good teams. We've had a lot of really great players. Without naming any of them, you could list. Look up in the Ring of Honor and others who really were outstanding players. My feeling on Al McCoy is you put them all together, and who's the MVP? It's Al McCoy for what he did and how he represented the Suns over 4.5, 5 decades.
Absolutely. A special, special man. Is it for you, when you look back at all of those years and all of those great versions of the Phoenix Suns, do you have any special memories or stories or interactions during all of your great times that when you think of all of your years with the Suns, you think of Al and what he meant or something that he might have done during that time?
Well, first of all, in the early years, I traveled with the team, either coaching or being there with new coaches that I wanted to break in. Al and I spent time on the road. He was a terrific jazz pianist, and he loved going to piano bars and being able to play. I have great memories in various cities around the country where we spent time in piano bars because of his great interest. He was a great entertainer. He really was. And he represented us impeccably. When you think about, hearing some of the people over the last couple of days tell stories and reminisce and, what did Al mean to him, to them, etc. You've never heard a bad word said by anyone about Al McCoy.
Yeah.
Not one word in terms of negativity. He was well beloved, and we were really fortunate to have his presence in our lives.
Jerry, we appreciate the stories and you reminiscing and you coming on to tell us about Al McCoy, because we're all certainly sharing those memories right now. We appreciate this. We hope this phone call finds you in a great spot, and we look forward to chatting with you soon, okay?
All right, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Jerry Colangelo joining us here on Arizona Sports and our tribute to Al McCoy with those wonderful stories.
The last thing that Jerry said was one of the thoughts that I had coming into this show was, over the years, from being a fan and a listener and a consumer of what he did, and then getting to see the media side of it, and then in a small way getting to work with Al McCoy side by side, kind of with the same cause, nobody said ever a bad word about him.
No,
he is universally loved.
Nope.
And when I became the PA announcer before the pandemic hit, Al and Tim were still doing radio from courtside. So I was a couple seats away from Al. I had the pleasure of not only watching the game up close, but getting the soundtrack from Al 5 feet away. But it was amazing to see the parade of broadcasters, whether they were national broadcasters or any of the local teams coming in, the local play-by-play broadcasters, just coming and paying homage to Al. Like, he was that loved.
No doubt about it. We had Mike Breen on our show to talk about it, and he was so busy that day taping a bunch of commercials for ABC and ESPN, and when he heard the reason why we wanted to have him on the show, he stopped all of it. He goes, I will stop anything to talk about my hero. I will stop it all just to come on and talk for a few minutes about Al. It was absolutely wonderful. All right, so Vinny and I look at this from forever fans of the Phoenix Suns dating back to the 70s. We're in our 50s. Kellan Olson is not. He looks at it from an entirely different perspective, but one that you're going to want to hear as well. Our Suns guru will join us next year in our tribute to Al McCoy on Arizona Sports.
Thank you for 51 wonderful years and allowing me to bring the story of the Suns in the NBA to you. It's been a great ride.
His voice is like family to Arizona. Here's more of our tribute to Al McCoy.
Kid has the ball. Kid waiting. Kid looking. Kid throws the ball over to Rex Chapman, who launches up a three. Oh! Shazam! He got it! 1.9 seconds left. Oh! Rex! King Rex!
Or of a more recent vintage.
Rubio on the drive. Waits, shoots. The shot is not good. Rebound Zubats. He loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time. 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker. 5 seconds. 4 seconds. Booker on the drive. Goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot! He got it! He got it! And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother.
And let's remember the setting of that particular basket. That was during the bubble Suns run, where they're playing in an empty gym in Orlando, Florida, and Al and Tim are sitting in a room by themselves down at Footprint Center.
Calling the game, just watching TV.
While construction's going on, and he was still that sharp.
He was still that good. Vince Marotta, Dave Burns, it's our tribute to Al McCoy. And as I alluded to earlier in the segment, you know, we're a couple of older guys here. We remember Al from the 70s and the 80s, but there is another fresher perspective of him, and for that we loop in our Suns guru, Kellan Olson, co-host of Arizona Sports at Night. Of course, you've made a living out of being down there at the arena, being around Al, being around this team. You look at it from a similar set of reverence, but also as a younger guy who doesn't have the shared life experiences of the two of us, and yet no less a sense of awe for what Al does or did.
Yeah, I told Lauren in the newsroom just now, this is the youngest I've felt in years by proxy, with you guys using me as like the youthful example here. So I really do appreciate this for my ego a little bit. But that's like the thing, and I think this was talked about a lot with Vin Scully and his passing too, like the multiple generations that Al spanned, like the generation that you guys come from in your age. Like I turned 34 this year, and I grew up on listening to Al, and there are people who are 15 years younger than me that like just graduated high school who grew up listening to Al too. So it's multiple generations that he spanned, and I think that the crazy part, or one of the many crazy parts of this, is hearing like those plays back, and it's like you don't really notice that much of a difference between them, and they're 30 years apart, just with like the quality of Al's call and just like the uniqueness that he was able to sort of inject into big, huge moments like that, like King Rex and all that kind of stuff. It's funny we came back to break from King Rex, because I used to practice the Rex Chapman shot in my driveway, and my dad would yell King Rex when I made it. So like to say I grew up on this stuff is an understatement, and to have Al even know who I was, like you guys are the same way. Like the first time he acknowledged you, you're like,
oh yeah,
what? He knows who I am?
Oh yeah,
what?
Yeah,
I think I told the story on the air during our show. I wish one of my great regrets of my relationship with Al is I can't remember meeting him because I was so nervous. I was petrified to meet the man, because he was. I could look at him dead in the eye and say, "You're literally one of the reasons why I'm here. I wanted to be you." And I was a college broadcaster at NAU. Every now and then we'd get a credential and come down and cover the games. And this is like pre-Barkley. This is 91, 92, kind of that era, right? Yeah. And I wish I could sit here and say the first time I went up and actually got the courage to introduce myself to Al. I don't, because I was scared to death of it. Like I was like, oh my God, there he is.
I never did it.
There he is.
I never did it. He just knew my name in passing, and we talked in passing. I never actually went up to have a conversation with him because I was too terrified. It was just like he meant so much to me growing up that I didn't have the courage to do it ever.
Do you remember the first time?
there was a lot of, because doing radio for as long as I did, there was a lot of phone conversations. But, you know, I didn't work until I came to work for Bonneville in 2011. I had never worked with an entity that was working hand in hand with the Phoenix Suns. So it was always that barrier. But in 2008, I was working on a startup sports website, and I covered the Arizona Sports Hall of Fame induction class. And, it was Darren Woodson and Bob Horner, and Al McCoy was part of that class. So I got to interview exclusively and sat down and didn't want to make it about me. But in our conversation while I was interviewing Al, I think that was the first time we had ever met face to face. And I had mentioned, hey, I dabbled in play-by-play and thanked him for being an inspiration to me when I was doing ASU women's hoops. And he just nodded, and he's like, oh, I'm familiar with your work. And I was like, all right, I'm melting, but I have to keep going. But that was the thing about Al, is he knew everything that was going on in this business. And I tell this story a lot. Over the past few years, you'd run into Al before the games in the media dining room. And he would make it a point sometimes. Hey, Vince, what's going on in sports radio? What's the dirt? And I would say, I got nothing for you, Al. And then he would sit down and he'd give me all the dirt for like 20 minutes. And I was like, wow, that guy's just connected.
Yeah, for me, I was in this very room 6 years ago. John Bloom at the time was doing the halftime updates, and we were looking for stopgap solutions at the time when John was away on vacation days or whatever it was exactly. And I was one of the stopgap solutions. So the first time I'm in here, I'm incredibly nervous. There's 3 minutes left in the half. I'm doing the prep thing where I'm pulling up all the boxes, looking at, okay, what are the scores here, there, when I'm doing all the score updates and everything. And then I just hear in the background on the speaker and hear coming up Kellan Olson with the Arizona Sports at whatever update. And I was like, He knows my name. It's just I couldn't focus anymore, which was actually the best thing because it relaxed me because I was so nervous about just going on the air alone for those 3 or 4 minutes. But everything that you've heard, listeners who did not have the great fortune that we did of just getting to know him a little bit, the kindest guy in the world. Had no right to be as kind as he was, if I'm being completely honest. And when Mike Breen was on your guys' show, Dave, I think he really hammered that and also just knew the game really well. He would come over to me sometimes and we would talk about not intricacies necessarily, but he would just make 2 incredibly salient points. And I'm like, that's better than anything I'm going to write tonight. And it's just, he really knew basketball and really loved it. And it was awesome to get to see him have the full ride that he did with the experience.
Yeah. And look, we talked, the three of us, and we were privileged and fortunate enough to know him. But I do think that people who listened to his call felt like they knew him too. Yeah. You know what I mean? We all shook his hand and broke bread and sat down and talked with him and all of that. But I think if you listened to him for any long period of time, you kind of felt like you knew him too, because he poured his heart and his soul into every single broadcast he did. And you can hear it in the big moments and in the small moments. He loved doing it. And there was never, it was just, how long is Al going to keep doing this? And as long as Al wants, he can just keep going because he loves to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important for the listeners to know, we value what we do so much. But even me, at the age that I'm at, I don't know if I'm going to, love doing this as much as I do right now in 10 or 15 years. I don't know. You don't know what happens with your appreciation and love for what we get to do and what we're so generous to do. Because I say that just to further appreciate how long Al did this. His love for this, just never dialed down even a little bit. His appreciation for what he was able to do and his connection to it, never went away. And it does for people in our business sometimes. It's just a natural thing that can happen with anything you do in life.
Yeah. He did it until he was 90 years old.
It's crazy. I am not going to write about the Suns until I'm 90 years old. I'm going to confirm that right now.
Kellan, you got a show coming up at 7 as soon as our tribute is complete. But man, thank you for stopping in for a few weeks.
It was really an honor to get to do this with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also joining us coming up in the next segment of the show, somebody who certainly has a tale or two to tell about Al, who went on our morning show with Vince and Dan and talked about it a little bit, including a self-created bit of radio genius.
Such a great story.
Al was the center of all of it. Todd Walsh is going to join us next here on Arizona Sports in our tribute to Al McCoy.
Here's a three-pointer by Booker. Shazam! D. Booker, back-to-back three.
There will never be another one like him.
Hi there. Hope you're having a hoop-de-doo day.
Back to our Arizona Sports Special, a tribute to Al McCoy. Here's more with Dave Burns and Vince Marotta.
Such a pleasure to be asked to host this for both of us. I know I speak for Vinny when I say this as well. We would have been offended if they hadn't asked us, right, for as long as we've been here living in this market and, sportscasting and being fans and just being kids here and growing up. And certainly somebody who was top of our list, got to get Walshy on, got to get Todd on. He's got to tell the story because he obviously had a deep and unique personal connection with Al McCoy on this, our tribute to Al McCoy. So joining us right now, longtime Valley broadcaster Todd Walsh here in our tribute to Al. Todd, I hope this call finds you well, man. How you doing tonight?
Good. Thank you, guys. I'm going to echo everybody's sentiments. It's an honor to be included in this thing. And I'm just going to be brutally honest with you. I have a lot of time on my hands these days, and I wanted to be someplace special when I listened to this show from the beginning. So I found a bit of an overlook where I'm parked and I'm looking at the valley and the lights of the city and just absorbing every word that you guys are speaking and your guests. And it feels like I can see from corner to corner the entire valley, and it reminds me of Al, that Al's probably touched every light that I'm looking at in every home and every transistor radio and every television. He didn't just transcend multiple generations, but I just think of every sport. He did the Phoenix Giants before baseball was even thought of in the major league sense. The Suns, the Roadrunners. He was even on the Diamondbacks cable of announcers, and years ago, and he did it all. And he touched so many lives. And I love what Jerry was just saying earlier: just universally loved, universally respected, and he had the dirt on everybody.
Yeah, he did. He did, Todd.
He did. I know. He would tell me things about my sports television network that I didn't know, and I wouldn't know for weeks or months.
Well, please, before we talk about the time machine Al McCoy story, which you've told and you tell so well, and I it's an amazing story. Please do remind our audience of the time that he did call Diamondbacks game or a Diamondback game or a Diamondback inning, because I know you guys played that during one of the D-backs broadcasts back when Al passed. And it was, I'm telling you, Todd, it was magic hearing him call a baseball game, even if just for a minute or two. It was absolute. Please tell that story.
Oh, yeah. I did not know that. I have to tip my hat to my longtime producer and television muse, Josh Kellman, who I'd worked with for so many years in Fox Sports Arizona. He had interned and worked with the Diamondbacks, and we were just talking about Al after he'd passed. He said, Al did games early on. He did, special weekend games throughout, I think, the first couple of years. I forget the exact time frame, and I said, you gotta be kidding me. And this was the day that we were going to do something in his honor on the Diamondbacks broadcast. And so one call went to another, to a text, to an email, to 8 other people. And you have to understand, we've lost the vast library that we used to have when our network went bankrupt. So to get what we found wasn't easy, but it was there in the Diamondbacks archives. And literally, from what I understand, Scott Geyer, their director of broadcasting, found one tape, plopped it in because he had a memory of a game that Al called in Anaheim, put the tape in, and there was Al being Al, and we snuck it on the air that night. And I wish we had done more of it. If our shows were what they used to be in terms of the time frame, I think we would have gone crazy with it. But to hear him call baseball and the Diamondbacks was magic.
Yeah, and with him and Joe Garagiola Sr. in the early days, calling Diamondbacks games. Baseball fans in this market were spoiled from day one from that standpoint.
A new meaning of the phrase Legend City, listening to those two talk, for sure.
No doubt.
Todd, tell the time machine Al McCoy story, and then when you tell me the word go, I'm going to play this 2-minute clip that we have here. Tell everybody about this.
And I want to say this. When you guys played it, Vince, on the morning show, I sat in my office with tears rolling down my eyes because it came alive again, and that brought Al alive again in my heart and in my mind. And I'll never forget the moment. And this was a different time and place in our broadcasting world, but this was in the early 90s, and the Suns were the center of our universe at KTAR. And when I was working with Jude LaCava, Jude and I used to do theme nights, radio theater, as Jude taught me, and we weren't afraid to lay it all out there for 4 hours. We didn't have Diamondbacks baseball to hide behind every night. We were the only game in town. Then we pushed the limit from time to time, and we came up with an idea that we wanted to recreate the ending of the Suns-Celtics triple overtime game, the greatest game ever played in NBA history. And we weren't arrogant enough to recreate the ending as a Suns victory. We knew we couldn't test the universe with that, but we wanted to change the ending. So we had a few ideas and bounced a few things around, and then we spent 4 hours talking to the who's who of that game. We had Tommy Heinsohn, Dave Cowens, JoJo White, Richie Powers was on, Jerry Colangelo, Dick Van Arsdale, and Paul Westphal. That was the announcer crew and the storylines that we were weaving about that particular game. And then I asked Al, I said, could you play along with something? And I told him the premise, and he had that twinkle in his eye. And I said to Al, I want you to recreate the call, but I want it to go into the fourth overtime. We're going to call it the 620 Sportsline Time Machine with all these goofy sound effects. And he said, you got it. So what's the play? Well, I'd asked Paul Westphal. I said, so how would this have happened? How would you have tied the game? And Paul in an instant said, I know what's going to happen. It would be this. We get the ball to Van, and Van has to make the shot. So I went to Dick Van Arsdale, and I told him that story. And Dick was like, oh, that's great, but I got to be able to make the shot over Don Nelson. I said, that's great. So I did those interviews, and then we went over to Al's office and sat down, and he said, okay, hang on a second. He pulled out a piece of paper, and he scratched down without looking anything up. This is before the internet, I might add. And he wrote down all the guys that would have been on the court at that situation. It was going to be an inbound play. And then I told him what Westy had drawn up for Van. And then he looked at it and he said, all right, ready to roll? And he cupped his hand over one ear and grabbed my microphone, and I hit record on my Marantz tape deck, praying to God and the radio gods that I was truly recording. And if you've ever worked in radio, you know that's always a possibility.
Yes, sir.
And Al laid it out, one take, and I sat there, and as I watched it in my mind's eye, the play literally happened. I don't play it that often, but when I do, I'll always go back to that moment sitting with Al, his showmanship, his ability to paint the picture, because radio is theater of the mind, and he was simply the best. And this one that you're about to play is for Suns fans everywhere. We couldn't get you a win in that game, but Al McCoy delivered you the fourth overtime that night in Boston.
Well, my momentum was carrying me out of bounds. There was no way I could have caught the ball and stayed in bounds because the pass was straight down the sideline. I would have had to tip the ball back to somebody like Curtis Perry, and he would have had to throw a pass up to Van Arsdale, and he would have had to bank in about a 15-footer to tie it and go into 4 overtimes. And then I think we would have worn him down in the fourth.
Well, in the third overtime, when it looked like it was all over for us, Boston took the ball in bounds and threw a pass that Paul Westphal deflected, and Curtis Perry wound up with it, threw a long pass to me about 15 feet on the left side, and I banked the shot in. I didn't get many shots that day, but that one went in. Nelly made a great attempt to try to block the shot. He wasn't quite good enough to get there, so I made the shot and put it into overtime, went into the fourth overtime.
Well, it's come down to the wire for the Suns, and they'll go with Van Arsdale, Perry, Garherd, Westphal, and Sobers. And the Celtics will play the final 12 seconds with McDonald, Don Nelson, Ard, JoJo White, and Havlicek. 12 seconds to go in the third amazing overtime here at Boston Gardens. And the Celtics hanging on by their teeth to a 128-126 lead. All right, Celtics have the basketball. Suns set defensively. It'll be inbounding the ball. Hondo. He dropped it into Ben McDonald. Back to Havlicek. Over to Nelson. Here's a long pass down the left side. It's tipped by Westphal. Westphal comes up with the ball. Up on the side, it goes to Perry. CP to Van. He's got a 15-footer. Can he hit it? He scores! Van Arsdale from the angle left cans the 15-footer as the buzzer ends the ball game in the third overtime. This one is tied. I don't believe it. I do not believe it. We're going to go to the fourth overtime as Van can and does. It's a 15-footer. He was going against Nelson. He fired it off the glass and it went. And this one is tied again. Oh, brother.
That's great. That's great. What skill, what creativity for him to be able to just do that.
That's the third time I've heard that in a month, and it's magic every time.
Fantastic.
And by the way, Todd, great pre-computerized production there, too, my man. That's very well done.
So I think I had a reel-to-reel, a cart deck, probably a turntable. And the only thing, when I hear that, the only thing I cringe at is the sound of the horn I remember we spent hours trying to find something that sounded like a horn, and it just sounds so meek and weak. But then again, it was in Boston, so I hope Jerry Colangelo was listening to that, and I hope he got a big smile on his face, because
awesome.
Anyone that knows Al, and you guys know, he had just a devilish sense of humor. And just imagine a 20-something-year-old kid holding a microphone for Al McCoy, and by the end of that bit, it's alive. That moment is alive. It was literally happening in his head, and I'll miss him. His legacy is secure. He's the GOAT. He is the Mount Rushmore of sports broadcasting in the state of Arizona, to me.
And I mentioned this to Burnsy, too, in preparation for this show. I was tooling around the internet, and a show that you hosted from a couple years ago, The Voices of the Valley, when Valley Sports Arizona was still around. You hosted the Al McCoy rendition of that show, and I would recommend it. And you get great stuff from Al, where you're playing word association with players, and he admitted that he feels like the NBA took a championship away when Boris Diaw and Amari Stoudemire got suspended. It was great stuff. So I appreciate that too, Todd.
If I could tell you one story about that will live with me forever. If you guys can just imagine this, that show was shot in two different locations. One at Al's house on the west side, where he lived for a million years, and then we went downtown and we finished the sit down. So we had to take a little caravan, and Al wasn't driving then. So I drove him from his house to our studio. That was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a normal drive. Then we were done, and I had to give him a ride home in rush hour. And that drive will live with me forever, because we talked about everything. It was life right there in my car. And I was very, very acutely aware of what was happening and how unbelievable it was that Al was sitting in my car telling me stories and sharing and just commiserating. And that's what I will always remember about him, that he was a part of a team covering a team. And you guys know this. If you were on that team, he had your back every step of the way.
Yeah. Todd, thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy life and parking your car with a view of the valley and listening to us and chiming in with us and sharing and reminiscing. I can't think of anybody better, more equipped to be able to tell the stories that you tell. So we really appreciate it, of course, and we wish you nothing but the best. And I know we'll all talk to you very soon. Okay, sir?
I appreciate it. There's a guy next to me here at this pullout that wants to know what the score is in the fourth overtime. I'm not sure what to tell him. I think that's started yet.
Work on that, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Toddy. We appreciate it.
Love you guys.
Thank you, man. Todd Walsh, our good buddy here, joining us on Arizona Sports. When we come back, we'll continue to reminisce. Me and Vinny, we've got a few minutes left on the show before we hand things off to Arizona Sports tonight. We'll do that next in our tribute to Al McCoy here on Arizona Sports, the local sports leader.
His first year when he was a rookie, 5 years ago, was when they put me in the Ring of Honor. And when I was out at the halftime ceremonies at the arena, I looked over on our bench, and there was one player sitting there during halftime, and it was Book. All the other players had gone into the locker room, but he was sitting there by himself. So a couple of days later, I saw him. I said, "Hey, Book, I noticed the other night you sat during the halftime, and you didn't go in the locker room." I said, "How come you were sitting there?" And he looked at me and he said, I know I'm a rookie, but I just wanted to know what it would be like for someone like you to get that kind of recognition. Well, I knew then that this was kind of a special kid.
There was that photo that Tim Ring had put on social media of Al and Book kind of walking arm in arm into the arena, Al with his cane. And that cut was from our interview with Al McCoy on the Burns and Gambo show the day after he called his final game. And I knew he had a special relationship with Devin. I didn't realize how special it was until he told that story. And that, you talk about spanning generations, Vinny.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, right? Like you think about all the great players to play in the history of the Phoenix Suns, and his favorite might have been Devin Booker, which I thought was extraordinary.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I hold Devin Booker in such high regard. He's a great basketball player, but he's also very appreciative of the history and what's happened in this franchise. The franchise, and Devin Booker's another guy who knows everything that's going on in that franchise, and he takes pride in that. And even later on, and I was, that was my first year of doing PA, and my very first game as the PA announcer was when Robert Sarver, who was still the owner, took the microphone during one of the first timeouts and made the announcement, "Hey, Al, come on out here." and announced March 3rd, you're going into the Ring of Honor. And it was kind of a surprise to Al. That was a really cool moment. But the Booker and Al relationship continued, obviously, throughout. And you mentioned that photo that Tim Ring snapped, and it's very heartwarming. But a couple of years before that, when the Suns set their franchise record for regular season victories, they got their 63rd win. There's you can find it. We have it archived on our YouTube page. Devin Booker came over post game and signed his own jersey and gave it to Al and said, "You deserve this. This is for you." And I had a front row seat to that whole exchange. And I'm very, very glad that I saw it. But yeah, it was a very, very special relationship that they had.
I do want to say, because he's a colleague and a friend to both of us, that John Bloom does an extraordinary job as the radio play-by-play announcer in taking over for Al when Al ultimately decided to retire. But it makes me sad and nostalgic to know that this will be the first season of Suns basketball in decades in which there is no Al McCoy, and understanding full well Al didn't do the broadcast last year, but knowing that he's not even around, it lends a gravity to this season.
It does.
That I think I'll be thinking about a lot tomorrow, and certainly I'm sure you'll be thinking about a lot when you're getting ready to handle PA over the weekend as well when the Mavericks are in town, right?
Yes. But I will say this, that Al will always be with the franchise.
Yes.
This year, the commemorative band on the jerseys that says Al. And would this not be a wonderful journey for Al to get a front row seat from elsewhere to see the Suns win their first championship this year?
Leave me with this. When you were playing basketball as a kid growing up here in Phoenix, which Al McCoy call did you use when you hit a shot over one of your buddies? Do you know off the top of your head?
It was always Swisheroo for two.
You were Swisheroo for two?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I was a Zingo the Strings guy.
Depending on the day, sometimes it was Heartbreak Hotel.
I was either a Twine Time or Zingo the Strings. Yeah. It never Shazam was later, but it was Zingo the Strings all the time. Yeah. Vinny, it was an honor doing this with you, man.
Absolutely. Right back at
you. This was great. Arizona Sports at Night is coming up next here on Arizona Sports. Thank you to everybody who listened, everybody who participated. We appreciate it.